I've been very fortunate this last week to have our good friend Eduardo Zambrano come up from California to help us with a retreat of inquiry, a retreat of investigation into the nature of mind. And he's been very generously done this for 4 or 5 times now. One year we came twice and then 3 other times. So I'm very honored to have Eduardo here, and I'd like to start off by inviting him to just make comments, insights, anything he'd like to say about this week, what's going on, how to carry it forward. Then we'll let a few other people say something about how to bring the whole retreat together based on your experience, and then I'll cap it with a couple comments. So let me offer this to you. Do you want to hold it or do you want to call it on? Want your cheat sheet?
Yeah, I think I'll manage, and I like keeping track of time to make sure that I don't meander.
Eduardo is extremely good with time. I always feel inadequate when it comes to timekeeping. He's around.
So
take your time.
Thank you, and welcome everyone online and here in the room, and retreat participants and residents to today. I'd like to say a few words about what I learned and how it connects to the larger picture of practice in the Buddhist tradition, and how it connects to the larger picture of our relationship to our people in our lives at large. And so we came here to study Zen. I learned that Dogen Zenji said to study Zen is to study the self. And so we brought a bunch of ourselves and are really interested in learning about ourselves. And so that was like the first step. And then Dogen says to study the self is to forget the self. And so then the instruction we had was, forget yourselves and write a bunch of concepts you have about everybody in your lives. And we noticed that we have thoughts about how the world should be running in our lives constantly. So, and as a way of actually making this a very personal experience, both online and here, raise your hand if you have had stressful thoughts at some point in your lives. Yeah. And so these stressful thoughts, I've come to see that we learn in Zen that they're empty, and so we can watch them and let them come and let them go. And I've learned that they're actually useful as well. Useful. And so I love that. I love that then I can take my thinking mind and learn something about myself. By forgetting myself, by just focusing on the thoughts I would have about the world. So this week, together, we did this. We learned how to identify our thoughts about the world, and then we noticed what happened when we believe these thoughts. Okay? When we buy into the story that they would tell us. And each one of us did this investigation in the context of very concrete experiences we've had in our lives that were stressful. Like one that comes to mind is, it's 8:45 p.m., the baby is in the crib, he's 14 months old, and it's been a while and he's crying, and I have the thought he should be asleep by now. And what's the reality of it? He isn't. And he should be asleep by now. How do I react when I believe this thought? And so I enter into the thought of what reality should be instead of how it is, and I notice what happens. And so I invite you all, if you've had thoughts about how others should be, what happens when you believe those thoughts about these others? And I can do this investigation now as if my baby is in my crib in front of me, and I notice that when I believe that he should be asleep, I become impatient. And I don't see him anymore. I feel an exasperation. And then I'm filled with shame. And a sadness. And I'm feeling it, I'm connected to that moment as though it's happening now. This is the effect of believing a thought. I'm connecting to my present experience as though I'm there, as a way of studying Zen. Cause and effect. This is what happens when I believe a thought. So I don't have to read about this in a book. I don't have to watch, the video. I am student of my own experience. And each one of us through this week, we became students of our own experience. What happens in our lives when we believe our stressful thoughts? And suffering was what happened. So we learned about the first two noble truths, the suffering and what was the source of suffering. I learned it because I saw that when I believed my thought, I suffered. That was the suffering was the effect. So the investigation doesn't end there. There's always something else. What else is there is a question we ask during the retreat. And in this context, we ask it by, and who would you be, dear Eduardo, last week, in front of that crib, without the thought that he should be asleep by now? Same situation, same 8:45 p.m., same crying baby. Just drop the thought that he should be asleep by now. So I'm not going to guess how I should be or remember how I was. I'm just going to be there now. I can just hear him. He's 14 months old. I can see that he's looking at me, and I don't look away. I like this me a lot better than the one that's the believer. So I noticed that too. So this week we learned about the third noble truth in this retreat, the end of suffering. Just seeing what I couldn't see before, that there was something else. Who would I be without that thought? A listener, holding space for myself and for my baby. Being a parent to both of us. And in that intimacy, a yummy state of connection with whatever is happening and arising at every moment. To forget the self is to be one with the 10,000 things. And it looks like baby now, and crib, and this body. A unity that is inseparable, that would only be perceived to be so when I believe my thoughts about what's supposed to happen, instead of what is actually happening. Participants in this retreat encountered a method of inquiry that would allow you to learn at a very visceral level how suffering is born, how suffering ends, and the intimacy that underlines all things underneath the layer of believing. We didn't have to learn it from a book, although books are wonderful. We learn it in the laboratory of our own inner world and experience. And as we practice this method over and over again, it becomes like a muscle memory, and then we can carry the steadfastness that we discovered that we had into the world. And we can be better listeners to our loved ones, and better listeners to the people that we sometimes find a hard time listening to. And that becomes what we call in this tradition a bodhisattva activity, fearless in the face of what seemingly cannot be held or heard. We begin by understanding the characteristics of our own very personal experience. That is the playground. That is the Zendo. That about sums up what we did. We did this in the context of a technique called the work of Byron Katie, which was developed by my teacher, mentor, and friend, Byron Katie. And she just goes all over the world teaching this technique. And as you may have been able to see, I seem to have had, there's an intimate connection between that and practice, Buddhist practice, Zen practice, transformation practice. And so we did that over and over again here, and again with the intention of us becoming adepts at it, that it may help us go place to place like we can get good at riding the bicycle, and if that is our mode of transportation. I want to end by really remarking that my thought about that he should be asleep by now is actually a gift. Look at all I learned from that. So the realization that every thought that we have is a gift is what is known in this tradition as the Pure Land. Like everything that comes is part of the great perfection. Not just 99.9%, except for that pesky little thing. If we could just finally get rid of that pesky little thing, then wouldn't things be just okay? Even that pesky little thing is the face of the beloved. Thank you.
There's more time if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'm trying to implement my directions, not to meander.
No, good.
And yeah, I mean, we're here. We can have a conversation, take it further, and I think that let me see. Since Hogan says that there's more time, I have notes. My notes remind me that the path of Zen is radical. The path of non-duality is like there's a gradual path. You kind of clean up and clean up and clean up, clean up, and eventually you kind of something is clean. And so there you see there's a notion of time involved, and the developers of Zen said, what if we just live out the life that would come from that cleanliness from the start? It was radical. It's like we begin with the end. It's over. Yay! And we go from there, but we don't have to wait until the end of time to be free. We can actualize freedom, in every step we take. And so this path of looking into thoughts, which, we call inquiry or the work, it's a radical path. It is saying that too, even this too is the path. Not the path to something greater and bigger than, but it's a path of intimacy now. Like that, might that be enough? Like this later, I mean, it never arrives. So here is like how we can help land that in our experience. Like, just think of the moment when the future arrived. And if you look for the moment when the future arrived, you realize that the future never arrives. So the future never arrives. Great, that I don't have to depend on it for me to be okay, because it just never arrives. So let's see. Notes. This thought, they're my teacher, my projections, my nourishment, my meal, my gift. Anything I might see and encounter. This too is my face. And I don't want to say that as this too is my face. I reached that conclusion a few years ago, and here I am kind of reminding myself. Like at every moment, it's like, can I find it anew? And the method that we practice here is powerful because it says, be specific, you know. It's like you're never eating raisins, you're just eating that raisin. So can that raisin be like the most amazing raisin that you will ever eat? It is the most amazing raisin you will ever eat because this one will never eat another raisin. Later, Eduardo, whatever that is, may eat another raisin, but this one is eating this raisin, is thinking this thought. So when I am thinking a thought like he should be asleep by now, that's all there's left of me. May I honor it and be transformed. When I dismiss it, it's like it comes to haunt me. When I dismiss my thought, raise your hand if you feel that you kind of have like a little cadre of thoughts lurking in the background that you have not been able to see fully. So look around. That's called karma. You know, that's the name for that stuff. And so when I eat the thought now, it's like I'm paying cash. You know, eat it, swallowed, digest it, it's done. You know, and that's a gentle reminder not to meander. And they're the children of the beloved. The great mystery cannot be known but by its fruits. And its fruits looks just like this.